talk about today?
Why don't we talk about what happens in between when the contract is signed and the closing happens?
I love that.
Okay. So
let's say we write up the contract and we
Okay.
all get signed around.
and in this crazy market, we're super excited because we've secured a fabulous property.
Yes. And
It's all done, right?
Yeah, it's a perfect
Do we
house.
just wait for keys?
Not so much. I've never seen a perfect house. Have you ever seen a perfect deal?
I've never seen a perfect deal, at least not in the current market.
So most people, when they buy the house, they're like, what happens next? How long does this take? For me, it's usually between 30 and 45 days.
And, you should prepare yourself that if it's outside of that, that might be an extended closing period from a seller's perspective.
Yeah.
So in the first 2 weeks, that's really, to me, when, the meat of the action is.
Right. That's when we're going to hire the inspector to come out and take a look at the house and let you know if there's any systems that need to be repaired or if there are any maintenance issues.
Or maybe a need for an additional inspection.
Right, like a sewer inspection.
Or you need to have a specialist come out, an electrician,
Chimney guy.
foundation expert.
Oy. Let's hope
So
not.
hopefully not. But
But that's where it happens. And during that first 10 days,
7 days, maybe 5 days in today's market.
during the inspection period, that's when you can back out because anything you find wrong with the house and keep your earnest money.
And other than some of the bank-owned deals, so when you're dealing with a foreclosure, sometimes in there you've got to provide some evidence of why you're backing out or what your concern is. You have to show them. When you use the state contract, you can exit the agreement in the inspection period for a whole lot of reasons. It's pretty open-ended. So as a buyer, you're really well protected during that period, and you're entitled to your earnest money if you decide to cancel at that point.
But let's say you've had your home inspection, you found a couple things you didn't quite like, you asked the seller to take care of them. The seller's awesome. The seller takes care of them.
They stepped up.
They stepped up and you waive your inspection. You're like, as long as you take care of these things before we close, I'm golden.
So then you're done, right?
No, unfortunately, you're not done yet.
So the day after inspection, what usually happens?
Then we order the appraisal.
And that's notable to a buyer because that's usually when your lender is going to put their hand out and they're going to want to check for the appraisal.
Right, $500-600.
So you've just written an earnest money check, you've paid your inspector, possibly your sewer inspector, and now you are going to do cash check, credit card for your appraisal.
And it's the important thing to know about the appraiser is he doesn't really work for you.
You're paying for it, but
He doesn't work for the buyer, he doesn't work for the seller, he works for the bank that's going to loan the money to the buyer.
so that's why you have an inspection, because that inspection is about you and your protection. But the appraiser is protecting the bank and
So-
their investment.
They want to make sure you're not overpaying for the house. So after the inspection's over, then you're going to wait 7 to 10 days, hopefully, for the appraisal to come back. The appraiser is going to take a look at the market that's already happened. So they're going to look at sold properties within mile, depending on how dense the neighborhood is. And they're going to look at what's sold in the last 3 months. That is similar square footage, similar architecture, similar lot size.
Year built,
Yeah.
similar amenities.
And they're going to make sure that you're not overpaying for the house. And they're going to give an assessment. Every now and again, the appraisal comes in high.
Every now and again.
And every now and again, the appraisal comes in low.
And if the appraisal does come in low, there are protections built in for the buyer, right?
Right. So let's say you're buying a $200,000 house and the appraisal comes in at 180 and you're like, holy crap.
Actually, the seller is like, holy crap.
Yeah, everybody's like, holy crap. The realtors are like, holy crap. Everybody's holy crap and all over the place. And at that point, you have a choice. You can either...
If you used a finance addendum.
Right.
Because a finance
Who
addendum...
doesn't use a finance
I'm
addendum?
just saying, just in case. There are protections built into the finance addendum specifically addressing a low appraisal.
Yes. So
But that's for another time, right?
typically you have 10 days to back out for your inspection and 30 days to back out for your financing. Double check with your real estate agent and ask these questions about when these contingencies expire, but typically that's about what it is.
And to keep your finance contingency, to keep the protection of that, you need to make your loan application within the first 5 days of writing your offer. So you can see you are really busy right after what we call mutual acceptance. We didn't really define that, but mutual acceptance is when the contract has been agreed upon by all parties. That's like D-Day. That's day 0 for the clock to start ticking.
Is that what D-Day is?
In the real estate world.
So we've talked about financing. So what are some of the things that can go wrong or challenging? I mean, let's say, okay, so let's say the appraisal comes in a little low.
Okay.
Let's say it's just a little low. Let's just say it's $5,000 low. I mean, I've had situations before where the appraiser has been coming from like Bremerton or Bellingham and doing the appraisal, and he doesn't realize he's not using comps from a comparable neighborhood. He's not using sold properties that are actually like the property that the client is buying.
Yep.
In that case, a good realtor is going to go to bat for you, and they're going to submit real comps for the property and try to get the appraisal changed. You can't always do it, but you might try.
And sometimes they can't be swayed. And so in that case, there are 3 options built into the contract. The seller can lower the purchase price, the buyer can bring in additional cash to close, or the buyer can walk away from the agreement and get their earnest money back.
I would say there maybe is a 4th option where the seller comes down a little and the buyer brings in a little money.
Yes, compromise. How
Compromise.
nice. Because the whole file goes into underwriting and it's being reviewed. This is the really important part. This is what's changed in the last couple of years, so that's kind of an intense process right at the end. And so you don't know if this deal is really going through until it comes out of underwriting.
Right, sir.
Well, and here's a really good reminder. This is the reason we care what lender you're working with. So in the beginning, you're like, hey, I know so-and-so, and my brother's friend from college is a mortgage broker somewhere.
And a casino dealer.
Right. I mean, part-time. If you sense that we respond to that kind of negatively, this is why, because you don't know you've got a problem until you're down to the end and you're waiting for your house to close.
And all those contingencies we talked about are gone.
All your protection. So contingency equals protection for you as a buyer.
So, I mean, you're right there at the end. You think you're going to close. You're all packed up. And your keys, they're so close. And yet,
something happens. And if you don't have a really good lender to go to bat for you and go back to the underwriter who's sitting in the small windowless room somewhere looking over your papers,
explaining, and then they properly qualified you for the loan you're getting to begin with. I mean, I've had that happen where we're 2 days before closing and the lender goes, oh, sorry, this person doesn't qualify for this.
But that's a good reason, too, to make sure you provide all of your documentation. That's why we say that a pre-approval isn't really a pre-approval. I always ask, if I'm representing a seller, have they turned all their documentation?
Absolutely.
Has it been sent to underwriting? Because it's not official until all that paperwork has been vetted. So the appraisal on your purchase has come in.
Yep, everything's good.
Made value, which is realtor speak for it's come in it's been appraised for the sales price, so the contract price. Everything's looking groovy. You're in underwriting. And you come out of underwriting, and the lender says the magic words to us as realtors, which is,
we have docs.
Yay! The docs have been sent over to escrow, and escrow is the neutral third party that's there to execute the agreement, your loan documents, get your loan documents signed, get the deed signed, transferring ownership, move the money, which is the really important part.
So what happens is you're going to go in to sign. If you're a buyer, you're going to go in to sign first because you have a stack of papers this high and the seller has a stack of papers like this high. So they're going to want to make sure your papers are great before they have the seller come in. So usually buyer comes in and signs that evening or the next morning. The seller comes in and signs, and then all the paperwork goes back to the bank. They take one last look over it. Maybe call your boss and make sure you still have a job. Maybe pull your credit one last time just to double check.
Speaking of things that happen right at the end, right? Don't do anything stupid in the last 2 weeks.
Don't buy furniture. Don't buy a car. Not that this has ever happened to us.
Right.
Don't buy anything, ever. Just the house.
Call your lender if you need to make a purchase, just to double check.
So you haven't done any of those things. Right. And the lender double checks just to make sure you're cool, and you're cool. You're cool. They send the money to escrow. Escrow writes checks to the seller, writes checks to the government, writes checks to the realtors.
They pay off the mortgage on the house.
Pay off the mortgage on the house, and they send a courier down to the county to record the deed.
Now, keep in mind that this may happen over 24 hours. It may happen over 48 hours. If you're buying a foreclosure, it might take 72 hours for the bank that owns the property to review everything and give their blessing for it to close.
So you've signed, and you think, give me the keys. And Anne's like, no, you can't have the keys till the deed records.
Because signing is not closing, here in Washington anyway.
Yeah. So once the deed records, the courier will call the escrow office and say, we've recorded, and give them recording numbers. And then the escrow office will call all of us. They'll call Anne, they'll call me, they'll call the clients, they'll call the lenders and say, we've recorded.
Sometimes, more often than not, when that deed records down at the county, that's when you can get the keys. And your realtor gets that moment that we all wait for, which is we get to go and give them to our new clients. Best part of our job.
Best part of the job.
By far.
Yeah. Well, that and looking in other people's houses.
Okay, looking in people's houses.
This is it. Please let me know if this ain't love.
I feel like we're reporting the morning news. Good morning, Anne. Anne Jones. Anne Jones live on the street. What's the weather, Ann Jones?
I can't do live news.
Pull it together.
It's just a practice.
Okay, yeah, give us a slide, Jacob.
Because it's always like getting used to. Maybe
Little harder,
little
little
harder.
more.
Oh, she keeps sliding. This all
This is
my Oh, shoot.
Professional grade.
That was good.
Okay.
That was
Feel
good.
better. Hopefully I don't mess
Or the
it up.
Jean-Claude Van
It's in the
Damme of
follow
keep
through, I
throwers.
think.
So just like,
Yes, on the follow.
there we go. I see
See?
now. That was it.
Perfect.
Very nice.
That's
Okay,
perfect.
ready? Why don't we talk about what happens between contract and
Okay. Let me ask the question.
Oh, shit.
It's like T-ball. It's like T-ball. You need to